bourbon. Tuesday at 9 p.m. Eastern. That does it for us tonight. Thanks for watching. Banfield starts.
Hey everybody, welcome to Banfield. I'm Brian Enton in for Ashleigh tonight. It is Friday night. We made it to the weekend. We have got a jam-packed crime show for you tonight. The name Ted Bundy, of course you've heard that name. It is synonymous with evil, one of the most notorious serial killers in history. There are dozens of books and movies and shows and docuseries all about his heinous crimes. Most of them were written by people who never met Bundy, which is why the new book, Dark Tide, Growing Up with Bundy, is so compelling. It is written by Bundy's cousin, a woman who thought of him like an older brother. She hung out with him. She introduced him to her college friends. They continued to correspond even after his arrest. She has got a perspective unlike anyone else. And that cousin, Edna Martin, she will join me live in just a moment. It's going to be a fascinating conversation. All right. Also tonight, a preview of a murder trial tailor-made for Las Vegas. A county official stands accused of fatally stabbing a newspaper reporter who was writing about the turmoil in his department. Now, the victim was not just any reporter. His name was Jeff German, and his editor says he cut his teeth covering the mob, the worst of Las Vegas. The alleged killer is named Robert Tellis, and he swears he is not the worst of the worst. He says he was framed. Well, jury selection in this case starts on Monday. It is fascinating. Maybe you've never heard of it before. Ashleigh herself is going to walk us through the sensational case that's coming up in just a couple of minutes. And Karen Reed, bet you've heard that name before. Just because her murder case ended with a mistrial does not mean that she is off the radar or out of the headlines. Now remember, she stood trial on charges she killed her Boston cop boyfriend, running him over, leaving him to die on the ground in a blizzard. Well, Karen Reed appeared before a judge for a hearing today. Her defense attorneys are formally asking for the entire case to be thrown out. This isn't the first time they've asked about it. They just want the entire thing thrown out. They want no new trial. They want it just gone. And the judge can actually do that. They can just throw out the entire case and set Karen Reed free forever. One of NewsNation's top legal minds, Sarah Zari, she will join me right here to tell us Karen Reed's best chances and whether or not she may face another jury or whether the whole thing will just get thrown away. But first, there are not many killers more infamous than Ted Bundy, the serial killer who raped, kidnapped, and murdered dozens of girls and women in the mid-'70s. His crimes, they are very well documented. And yet we are now just learning some shocking new details about his life, things that we have never heard before, things about his reign of terror. His cousin, Edna Martin, has written a new book called Dark Tide, Growing Up with Bundy. The book is all about Edna's life with a notorious killer, the man she thought of as a big brother. They were cousins, but they were very, very close, like brother and sister. They spent a lot of time together as kids and as young adults. They lived near each other. They hung out together. They even discussed the rapes and murders happening around them, crimes that Bundy was behind. Of course, Edna didn't always know that. Edna corresponded with Bundy even after his arrest. She still got all the letters, which you see there. She's got a fascinating perspective on all of this. And Edna Martin joins me live now. Edna, it's nice to see you. I'm very interested in the new book that just came out. What was Ted Bundy like from your perspective? I mean, we've all seen the movies and the series, and we've read the articles, but you knew him intimately. What was he like for you?
Yeah, he was a great guy. He was a lot of fun to hang out with. He was very charming and very put together. And a lot of my friends really liked him. It was fun when he came over. We all looked up to him because he was accomplishing a lot. So he was a great guy to hang out with. And this was during the time that I was at the University of Washington. And so that's when we really became close.
We know that he targeted young women, obviously, Edna. I mean, looking back now, the fact that he would come over and hang out with your young friends, I mean, does that kind of freak you out now in retrospect?
Yeah. Can you imagine that while this guy was actually murdering women, young girls and women that were just like us, he was coming over to my apartment. I was exposing him to my friends. And that I have looked back on with a lot of, I don't know, it just absolutely sometimes still sets me back that we were welcoming him into our home.
Was there ever a time, Edna, where you thought to yourself, there's something strange about my cousin? I mean, not that you knew that he was a serial killer, but did you ever get a weird vibe about him?
Yeah, at the time I didn't detect that it was weird. I thought it was odd, but there was one time that he came over to my apartment and he showed up with a bag of groceries, which was also very welcome at the time because we were starving students. And we only lived about a 6 or 7 minute walk from each other. So he would drop by frequently. And when he dropped by with groceries, it was great. So we fixed dinner. And after dinner, we were dancing around, and my roommate and he started dancing to a slow dance. And I had just put the record on the record player. And I turned around and she was leaning her head against his shoulder. And he was looking down at her with this really mean, sort of vicious, clenched, tense look on his face. And the oddest part of it was that his eyes, which were really a bright blue, were totally dark. I hadn't ever seen him look like that before. And I called out to him and said, "Hey, Ted, are you okay?" And he at first didn't respond. And so I took stopped the record and yelled it again. And he sort of snapped out of it. And then his whole countenance changed. It was as if he was wearing some kind of a mask and somehow maybe it slipped at that point. I don't know. Because around family, he was this nice guy, but once that mask was back on, he was very friendly and just smiled and said, "Oh, no, I'm fine." And then the odd thing was he immediately left after that. He said, "Oh, man, I've got to go." And he took off. And my friend, Margie, didn't even know what was going on. She was kind of looking up like, what happened? So that was really weird at the time. But I didn't think why would I think that this was something that I should be worried about at the time?
Yeah, no, makes perfect sense. It would just be strange, but you wouldn't have known what was really going on behind the scenes. What's interesting, though, is women started dying and being killed, and you obviously knew that there was a serial killer out there, and you actually talked to Ted about that. What was that like?
Yeah, in fact, my boyfriend at the time was over, and this was after, we had talked about it with him on several occasions, but especially right after two of the abductions that happened in July of, what year was that? That was 1975. And he came over to our house, and we had the newspaper there with a composite drawing on the front of the newspaper. And we had heard, and it said in the newspaper that the person's name they were looking for had the name of Ted, and that he drove a tan or light colored VW Bug. And so Ted comes over, we look out the window, and there's his tan VW Bug. And he comes into the house, and the first thing my husband at the time, my boyfriend, thrust the paper in his face, and he goes, "Hey, look, Ted, this guy looks just like you." And Don was joking because we didn't think the composite really looked like him. But Ted just rolled with it. He goes, "Oh, yeah, I know. They've been, they've interviewed me. The police have come by and they've talked to me." And we were horrified for his sake that we thought that he was being put through this. And he said, but no, that's all good. I want to help in any way I can. And he told us, there's, like 40,000 VW bugs in the state of Washington or something, which is about right. There were a lot at that time because they were everywhere. And he said about 400 of the owners of these VW bugs are named Ted, which was not right. I found out later it was about 100, but he was very smooth about it at that time. And
so
he also
wasn't just a little...
Yeah.
No, sorry, go ahead. What were you going to say, Edna?
Oh, well, he also added that he said it was just a horrible thing that was going on, with these women being abducted.
Yeah, very manipulative, apparently. So
Very.
There wasn't just was there a little part of you that wondered Like, looking back, was there a little inkling at that time with the VW bug and him matching the description, or did you just totally think like there's no way it's him?
Well, we thought it was kind of a big coincidence and just really peculiar that all these things sort of added up, except that we could not possibly accept that he had anything to do with it, because that's not the person we saw. This was a person who had been very successful working on the re-election campaign of our really popular Republican governor, Dan Evans. He went undercover into the opponent's camp, even went in disguise. He'd show up and be able to report back to the camp about what was going on. There was a political reporter who really became friends with him. The governor even wrote a recommendation to him when he applied for law school. So he had a lot of us fooled, a lot of us. He was very good at it.
So then the arrest happens.
Yes.
And I believe you were in Alaska, right, when that all went down. What went through your mind then? I mean, did you still think they had the wrong person, or did it start to sort of unwind from there?
That was probably one of the worst, and one of the first times that I began to step off the edge of the cliff. And that phone call really shook me up. It was a ship to shore phone call. I had to go to the bridge of the ship. Other boats in the area could listen in to that transmission. And I get a call from my brother saying that Ted was arrested. And it just absolutely, literally blew my mind, because I could not, and I hoped it was a terrible mistake. We all hoped it was, that he was wrong place, wrong time. But it was one of those first steps of starting to become really concerned that something was going on.
Yeah, I can't even imagine what that must have felt like. So then you even correspond with him after the arrest, when he's behind bars. You have letters going back and forth. Did he admit it to you at some point, or like, what did he have to say about all of it?
Yeah, I mean, I did confront him when I got back from Alaska, but years later, when he was in prison sitting on death row, and I knew there was no chance he was going to survive that he was going to die, that I wrote him a letter saying, you need to tell what you need to help these families know what happened to their daughters. Because the biggest thing that is just still my concern to this day is for the families that he ruined. He just destroyed lives, left a swath of destruction. And some of those young women and girls, their bodies have never been found. And these families have never had a chance to put them to rest. And so I wanted to take that opportunity, because I thought, well, maybe I still have some kind of influence on him, that maybe I could get him to talk, to confess. And that's what I wrote in those letters. And he did not respond favorably to my pleas.
What did he say?
He told me that I needed to know myself first. I said, once I get to know myself, I would know him. And, that I needed to relax. And he also said that I have not killed anyone. He actually wrote that out in my letter, in one of the letters to me. And he also said that he had no regret, remorse, or anything for what he'd done. And
so these were pretty kind of turned it around on you. On you in a minute. It's very it's enlightening. I mean, you're just touching the surface of what you have in the new book. People should definitely go check it out. It's fascinating. Thank you so much for joining us, Edna. I really appreciate it. I want to bring in Dr. Catherine Ramsland. She's a forensic psychologist and the author of several popular books about killers and their crimes, including How to Catch a Killer, Serial Killer's Apprentice, and Confession of a Serial Killer. And what's so interesting about Dr. Ramsland is she has been in the room with killers like this and spoken to them face to face. And hearing Edna's story, Dr. Ramsland, I've talked to you about this before, but it's still so chilling to me that these guys can have these multiple personalities where they can be good family members and no one suspects a thing, and they're literally like savagely raping and killing people behind the scenes. I still can't wrap my mind around it.
Well, part of it is that they have very superficial feelings for other people. They're generally narcissistic. They've learned to present a facade. They can pivot into whatever they need for any given situation because they are not rooted deeply in integrity or truth or caring about other people. They care about themselves.
Yeah. And you've been studying Ted Bundy for years and years and years. What stands out to you with Edna's story now and her book coming out? Is there anything especially interesting to you?
Yeah, there are a couple of things that I was really looking for when I heard about the book. One would have been along the lines of what Jeffrey Dahmer's father wrote when he talked about how easy it was to dismiss things that were concerning about his son because he could reframe them in a more benign way. And I think she had that experience, Edna had that experience of, as she's beginning to realize that Bundy, her cousin, might be this killer, she's got to find a way to figure out how did she not see this? How was it that she could be friends with him, socialize with him, introduce him to her friends, and never see what was going on? And I think it's really valuable to have relatives of serial killers, books of this nature, because we do then understand how easy it is to be duped because our minds are not going to accept that somebody we know could possibly be doing these things. That was one thing I looked for. But the other thing was her understanding Bundy's insecurity and resentment. One of those things had to do with her family, and she gave us an inside look at her family. They had a lot. They were financially set. They were college professors. Her parents were college professors. They traveled the world. All the things Bundy wanted and wasn't going to be able to get for the circumstances he had. So the resentment that we already knew was there, now we get to see details about how it formed.
Yeah, and when Edna described that moment that she remembers where he locked in his eyes on her friend, and she says his eyes almost like changed colors, I mean, that's really something.
Some of the people who had interrogated him said the same thing. They could see his eyes change into these large pupils, and even could smell an odor coming off of him that was really creepy. So what she said in that particular scene is very similar to what other people have said too.
Smell and odor, almost like a sweat, some kind of sweat comes off because they're getting excited or something.
Yeah, it's an odd odor. It's explainable. It's natural, but it's when he's getting excited, when he's fantasizing about what he's been doing or what he wants to do with somebody. There is a biological shift that can occur, and people had noticed it about him. So when she said that about his face and his eyes, I recognized that from what other people had said.
That is creepy. I always learn something new from you, Dr. Ramsland, and I wasn't expecting you to explain to me that the killers can have an odor that comes off of them. That's new. That's interesting. Dr. Ramsland, it's always nice to see you. Thanks for coming on a Friday night. We appreciate it.
Good to be here.
Still to come tonight, most reporters cover stories. Jeff German uncovered them. He went toe-to-toe with the wise guys of the Las Vegas mob and lived to write about it. He certainly wasn't afraid of a low-level county official who was abusing his staff, but maybe he should have been. When we come back, Jeff German's last expose and the suspect accused of doing what the mafia couldn't. This is a crazy story, what happened to this reporter. We're going to have it after the break. Starts Monday in a trial Jeffrey Garmain would have loved to cover. Garmain was an investigative reporter in Las Vegas whose beat was the mob, but who happily exposed wrongdoing wherever he found it. He won't be covering the murder trial of a small-time county official because he's the victim. Ashleigh did a deep dive on the story that allegedly got him killed.
He came into my office several times in a rage. You saw stress every day in multiple employees, and it just became worse and worse.
Robert Tellis was the elected public administrator of Clark County, Nevada. He oversaw the department in charge of estates. Not estates as in big lavish homes, estates as in the generally modest possessions of Clark County residents who die without families or die without leaving a will. As government positions go, public administrator isn't exactly a stepping stone to the governor's mansion, but Tellis allegedly turned his little backwater office into a veritable kingdom. And he was not a benevolent ruler.
We walked into his office and he said, "Sit down and shut up. You're not going to talk. I'm going to talk."
It felt dangerous to even have a hello, good morning conversation with coworkers in passing.
Jessica Coleman and Alicia Goodwin told CBS News why they dreaded even going to work.
Yes, he would bring his chairs up really close and demand that you really pay attention and look him in the eye while he told you horrible things.
It wasn't just the alleged hostility. Tellis had other quirks, like a no-talking rule, and he'd arbitrarily strip staff members of their duties and their authority, not to mention their dignity. On top of all of that, the women were convinced that their boss was having an affair with another employee. And while he was denigrating and undercutting them, he was allegedly treating the girlfriend employee like a queen, his queen. Alicia Goodwin had had enough. She finally decided to file a formal complaint with the Clark County Office of Diversity. The response? Tellis was elected. He wasn't hired off the street. You're stuck with him. And the informal complaints, those fared even worse.
I was told that my options were, how close are you to retirement?
So much for the proper channels. In March of 2022, a group now consisting of 4 women, and that is half of the full-time workforce in that office, well, that group decided to go outside the proper channels. Alicia Goodwin's father was an ex-Las Vegas police detective, and he knew just the right guy.
I'm Jeff Gehrman, an investigative reporter with the Las Vegas Review-Journal.
Jeff Gehrman was a Las Vegas legend. He didn't sing and he didn't wear rhinestones and he'd never headlined on the Strip or anywhere else. Gehrman put other people in headlines, often people who didn't like to be in headlines or want any publicity. In later years, he talked about some of those people on a podcast called Mobbed Up.
In my stories, I got used to calling Spilatro by his street name, Tony the Ant. He hated that.
If you don't remember Tony the Ant Spilatro, you may remember Joe Pesci's portrayal of him in Martin Scorsese's film Casino.
You get off talking to people about me behind my back, going over my head.
But would a reporter known for taking down wise guys give the time of day to a group of office workers who didn't like their boss? So the women decided to play the sex card. They started following Tellis and his alleged co-worker lover to their favorite meeting place, a shopping mall parking garage. And they captured what they saw there on video. Tellis and the woman insist that they were just talking. Talking about the business of the Clark County Public Administrator's Office. Never mind the secrecy, or the bobbing heads, or the smoothing of the dress when the woman gets out of the back seat. And so with all of that, reporter Jeff Gehrman was in. And a few weeks later, the Review-Journal ran a story with the headline, "County Office in Turmoil with Secret Video and Claims of Bullying, Hostility." Gehrman laid out the staff members' 3+ years of fear and abuse, along with Tellis's defense. He and the woman in the garage were just friends, he said, and the problems in the office were all the fault of, quote, a handful of old-timers resisting change. But then Gehrman wrote another story about Tellis, and another after that. And Tellis lashed out on Twitter. Looking forward to lying smear piece number 4 by Jeff Garman, hashtag one trick pony. I think he's mad that I haven't crawled into a hole and died. At some point, Tellis allegedly decided those really were the stakes at this point. Life or death. Last man standing. And allegedly, he was determined to come out the winner.
Wow, and there is more when we come back. A shocking murder and a trail of clues that led straight to the local politician about to take the stand. That's coming up next. So on Monday, one of two things will happen in a Las Vegas courtroom. Either jury selection will get underway in the murder trial of a former county official, or the case will get thrown out entirely, as that former official is hoping. Now, my money is on the jury selection, that's going to happen. It's going to move forward. Here again is Ashleigh with more on Robert Tellis and the reporter who knew too much.
Of 2022, Las Vegas reporter Jeff Gehrman was working on a 5th story about Robert Tellis and his one-man reign of terror in a county government office, when a visitor came to Gehrman's home uninvited. The person slipped into his yard and waited outside of his garage. It wasn't yet noon, but the sun was blinding, and it was brutally hot. Gehrman opened his garage and walked around to the side. The visitor may or may not have announced himself, and Gehrman may or may not have recognized him. Either way, the person was gone in moments after stabbing Jeff Gehrman 7 times in the torso and in the neck. A neighbor found Gehrman's body the next day.
Clark County officials are now confirming investigative journalist Jeff Gehrman was killed in a stabbing yesterday morning.
Police quickly obtained and released surveillance video of a suspect wearing a big straw hat, long pants, and a long-sleeved neon orange reflective shirt. And the suspect was wearing gloves. Not a look designed to blend in, but not unusual for people who work outside in 110-degree heat. But the suspect had an unusual way of walking, a very distinctive detail. And Jeff Garman's colleagues picked up on that right away. They'd seen it before, in Robert Tellis's office. Police also released a photo of a vehicle spotted outside of Gehrman's house around the time of the murder. It was a maroon-colored GMC SUV. Robert Tellis drove a maroon-colored GMC SUV, and it was parked in his driveway when a Review Journal photographer showed up at his house. But journalists weren't the only ones who suspected Robert Tellis from the start.
And I realized that it was true, and that Jeff had been found murdered. My first thought was Robert Tellis.
Ironically, it wasn't Jeff Gehrman or Gehrman's murder that resulted in Tellis being booted from his government job. It was Rita Reed, the soft-spoken, long-serving deputy public administrator. She had decided not to retire when a higher-up as much as told her it was her only hope to find relief in that toxic office. Nope. Instead, Reed decided to challenge Tellis's re-election bid, and she beat him in the primary. In November, she won the post outright. But weeks before that, and just days after Gehrman's murder, Las Vegas police served Tellis with a search warrant and then brought him in for questioning. They went through his home, they took his DNA, they even took the clothes he was wearing, and then they released him in a white paper jumpsuit.
Did you do this? Did you commit this murder?
But Tellis was not home for long. The search paid off in a big way. Investigators found the straw hat cut into pieces. They found shoes also cut up with blood on the soles. And Tellis's DNA matched the DNA from the crime scene. Crime scene was how the police put it. But Gehrman's friends at the newspaper say that Tellis's DNA was actually under the dead men's fingernails. Before the day was over, police were back at Tellis's house, this time to arrest him. But he would not come out, and he wouldn't let the officers in.
Our target is still calm on the phone. However, he has made a couple of 405 comments.
405. That is police code for self-harm. So they cleared the street and they called in a SWAT team. And soon, Robert Tellis was taken out on a stretcher. He had cut himself, but just barely. Tellis went before a judge the next day, and he's been locked up in a jail cell ever since. He's representing himself against the advice of the judge, whom he's tried and failed to get kicked off the case. And what does he plan to tell a jury in the face of such staggering odds?
I need to say that I'm innocent and that I was framed. As far as the vehicle goes, that there's a vehicle that looks like mine. As far as any other evidence goes, again, as far as what time it may have been planted, I couldn't say.
If Jeff Gehrman's killer, whoever it is, had hoped to shut him up, they failed. Gehrman's fellow reporters went through his notes and they finished his stories, and then fought all the way to the Nevada Supreme Court to protect his sources from this story and from countless others. He had kept his sources' names in various devices, which the police had taken in as evidence. As for the 4 county office workers who gave Jeff Gehrman his last expose, they say his murder was devastating. He was our hero, says the sitting Clark County Public Administrator, Rita Reed. We can never thank him enough.
So if the trial goes ahead and Robert Tellis is convicted, he could spend the rest of his life in prison. Prosecutors are not seeking the death penalty, so we'll have to see how it all plays out next week. All right, up next, did Karen Reed get her wish today and persuade a judge to throw out her murder case? We all watched Reed's second-degree murder trial fall apart when the jury could not speak with one voice. So what happens now? Today, Reed's lawyers formally asked the judge to make it all go away. I'll tell you what the judge said coming up next.
Urologist, how you can take control of your Crohn's with Skyrizi.
Control is everything to me. Oh.
Learn how AbbVie could help you save.
All right, so Karen Reed's lawyers really do not want to have a retrial when it's scheduled to start in January. Reed and her team even went before a judge today to make their case for dismissing all the charges, effectively asking the judge to set Karen Reed free for good. That's the same judge who declared a mistrial 5 weeks ago, saying the jury deciding Karen Reed's guilt or innocence on second-degree murder charges would never be able to reach a verdict. It's been a wild roller coaster, this one. Prosecutors say Reed hit her boyfriend with her car, left him to die outside in a blizzard. Reed's defense insists that their client was framed. So what happens now? What is the next big twist and turn in this whole drama? We've got Sarah Azari joining us now. She's a criminal trial attorney and also NewsNation legal analyst. Always nice to see you, Sarah. Okay, so what's the deal here? I mean, is there really a chance you think that the judge could just throw this entire thing out?
No. They went to court today. They argued for this. But essentially they said to the judge, even if, you're not going to grant this today, at least take it under submission and have a hearing on it and inquire further. Because remember, Brian, you've got a handful of jurors contacting the prosecutors and the defense lawyers and saying that essentially 12 people reached a unanimous verdict. Those boxes for guilty and not guilty on the verdict form were blank. There was no indication that this jury had reached a unanimous verdict. And as somebody who has dealt with countless juries, I can tell you that when they do reach a verdict, it's like going to the full extent of serving their civic duty. They will come back to the court and let the court know. And if we believe that there's some struggle there, we then ask the judge to poll the jury. The defense didn't do that. Now they're coming back and want to get this dismissed. But the thing here, I just want to make this point that judges care about judicial error and the appellate record. And this judge, I think, instead of just denying it flat out today, was like, okay, let me take it under submission. Let me maybe have a hearing so that I could at least show that I've given, some opportunity for jurors to testify here.
Well, and the defense today, they're asking for the judge to bring the jury in to talk about the deliberations, to talk about what happened. I mean, do you think that could actually happen? Could they bring all those jurors in, and could we find out what really went on behind the scenes?
You know, when I was catching up on this today, I was thinking about the Alec Murdaugh trial, and you and I have talked a lot about that, and the jurors that were brought in, they testified. But there you had jury tampering. You had a big basis for bringing back the jury. You don't typically re-engage a jury. Imagine if every time you go serve on a jury, then, in perpetuity, the court can call you back for all these motions and all these issues. Once you're excused, you're excused. So there's got to be a real good basis to get all these people back into the courthouse and an inquiry made and then have them testify. And I think that's where the judge is trying to figure out, how do I make a record? Do I allow this hearing to go forward just so I can check a box on the appellate record, or do I just flat out deny this?
It was a circus, Sarah. I mean, you remember this trial and the deliberations. You had all the people outside. And then when the mistrial came down, a lot of people suspected there was maybe going to be a mistrial. But we never really got a clear vision of what was going on behind the scenes, what the jurors were actually up to. I mean, do you think will we ever find out?
Well, it would have been good if the jury was polled, then we would know. And also that's how prosecutors determine whether they should retry the case. How many votes for guilt versus not guilty. And I think especially when it comes to the murder charge, Brian, there is like slim to no evidence to support murder. There is ample evidence to support manslaughter. And I think having that would have sort of been a good guide, roadmap for the prosecution. But instead, because the defense relied so heavily on that weird conspiracy theory about an officer that essentially is part of the Commonwealth, they put the prosecution in a position where if they don't retry her for murder, it looks like they're acquiescing to this weird conspiracy that someone else killed her.
Yeah.
Killed him.
That's a good point. Is it weird that they didn't poll the jury? I mean, is that unusual? If there's any indication that they need to do that, the judge typically does that. But even if the judge doesn't do that, the parties can ask the judge to do that. And everybody was sort of fine with it. Mistrial was declared. Everyone left the courtroom real quick, especially the defense. They just wanted to get the hell out of there. And so to me, that says this is kind of BS. Like, if you really thought there was a sign or signal or something, you would ask the court to inquire. The fact that you didn't, now you're going by the words of, 4 or 5 jurors speaking the minds of 12. It's just defense attorneys doing what we do. Yeah. And just real quick, I was curious. I mean, can they just keep retrying someone? Like, what if there's another mistrial? Can the prosecution just keep on doing that, or is there a certain point where they have to stop?
I mean, jeopardy doesn't attach until there's, an actual verdict. So technically, yes, but I've never seen it happen. And again, there's a lot of resources that the state is expending to try somebody's high profile like this. So we look at the votes, how many guilty, how many not guilty. And we didn't have that here. I don't know if there's something with the law there in Massachusetts, or this is just something that was so normal to everybody involved that they didn't feel like there was a need to do it.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens next with this one. Sarah Azari, thank you for joining us on a Friday night. You're Your dog
Good
was
to see you.
very
Have a great
quiet
weekend.
tonight, so we appreciate that.
I gave him
There's
a
no
Kong.
barking tonight.
I gave him a Kong with
that's
treats
good.
in it.
See, you learned. The
Yeah.
peanut butter, that's what you do. The peanut butter and the Kong. It's a good plan. All right, coming up next,
Have a great weekend.
a
Good to
rare
see you.
and you too. Up next, a rare and uncensored peek into the mind of a man convicted of 2 vicious murders. This is one of those faces that is hard to forget. You remember this guy, Wade Wilson. A jury said guilty ×2 in his double murder trial. He's about to find out his sentence, but we have uncovered more of those weird jailhouse phone calls. We had a couple last week. He certainly never thought anyone else was going to hear these. We'll play more for you coming up next. You remember Wade Wilson, the convicted killer with all the face tattoos. We got more of the creepy calls with his girlfriend from behind bars. Take a listen.
Why? I wonder why it came out that you stabbed that girl.
I don't know. I didn't.
What made you want to just choke her? I don't understand. What made you want to do that? You just felt like the urge to kill somebody? I don't understand.
Yeah, like the rage inside of me. Just the rage inside of me. And then
Nothing she did. You just wanted to kill her.
Yeah.
I don't understand, Wade. That scares me. That's scary.
Yeah, it is, Mila. When I get on like that meth, it does it to me. It makes me a killer.
You're going to go away for this forever.
What is it, baby? What?
You're never going to see freedom again. You know that.
Okay, but can I see you again?
I'll come visit you. What do you want me to do? I don't think I'm allowed to. I just don't understand why you had to do this to us.
I don't
why
know,
you had to do
Mila.
that to them.
To them, I know. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, baby. And listen, will you come see me when I go to prison, though, baby?
When are you going to? What do you mean?
Like whenever they send me to prison, like prison, not jail, prison.
So you're already just giving up. You're not even trying to fight this. You're just gonna lay down and let them give you whatever.
No, I'm gonna try to do the best I can, but they're gonna give me like 30 years. You know?
I think life.
I think life too. I don't think they're going to let me see the light of day. So what do you mean when you ask me, are you just going to lay down? Well, Mila, what else am I supposed to do?
I'm not really. I've never had to think about it before. This is brand new information.
But Mila, listen, if you're not going to come see me when I'm in prison, then I might as well just tell them to go ahead and kill me and give me lethal injection. But if you're going to come...
If I have to come see you, you're just going to rather just die?
Yes, Mila, you're my life, baby. I love you. Yeah. I would. If I don't get to see you for the rest of my life, I would rather just die. Yes, you're correct.
All that baby talk, it's so freaky. She just needs to get away from that guy. He talks about the rage inside of him. Have a good weekend. Cuomo's next.
Hey there, everybody. I'm Jesse Weber, filling in for Chris tonight on this Friday. Those were the shocking images of a horrific plane crash out in Brazil, and it landed on houses in a residential neighborhood. We're going to bring you more of that absolutely stunning and really horrifying footage. And here's the question.